Welcome everybody back. Do we need to set a time for adjourning executive, Mr. Espy?
Yes.
I would like to motion to adjourn executive or exit executive session at 6:14.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Ms. Will?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes. And before we get into B, which is our presentation and our featured speakers, I wanted to point out that our public participation policy reads that all green slips are due at the start of the meeting. We did start the meeting at 5 o'clock, but knowing that the first component was executive session for this evening, it will be now. So if you have green slips, they are due now. And the green slips are the public participation. So please turn those in. Thank you. Mr. Spicer, or is it Mr. Kaufman for the? Okay.
Thank you. President Chestnut, members of the board, it's my pleasure again to recognize some of our featured artists from throughout the district. I can have my featured artists from Site Health Elementary. Please come on down. I would like to give a special thank you to Ms. Karen Casper, the art teacher, and Ms. Melissa Carraher, for cultivating such a wonderful art environment at Site Health. So, let's recognize some of these student artists. I've got sixth grader Sarah Busker. Sarah has the winter silhouette on the end. Sarah, congratulations. Scarlett Driver. Scarlett is a Frank Lloyd Wright inspired candy architecture. Second from the left. Scarlett. Amelia Melzer has the value-focused bear. And Amelia's not with us. All right. Vanessa Wilkie has the pop art ring art. Madden Souter has the Charlie Harper inspired Robin. I have Caleb Stover with the root vegetables watercolor here. I have Cade Hours, who did the Piet Mondrian inspired. Did I get that right? Did I get that right? All right. Inspired heart. Kindergartner, congratulations, bud. Well done. I have Wesley Thunneman, Lego printed robot here on the end. Congratulations, bud. So congratulations, if you all want to hold up mom's dad. Congratulations for wonderful student art. I am going to ask Mrs. Casper if she would mind getting a photo of these wonderful student artists out in the hallway, moms and dad. I'm going to slide out with them to get those pictures. That would be awesome as well. Congratulations. Their artwork's going to hang. Their artwork will hang in the lobby of central office for the next month for the community to see. And you know I never want to lose an opportunity to celebrate the arts here in Milford. So I would like to thank all the board members, current as well as past members, Melissa Nolan, Dave Miranda, Jerry Coombs, who all resoundingly supported the renovation of this amazing space that we have. If you remember, about a year and a half ago, all the renovations were driven as the result of a safety audit. There were some significant safety issues for our students to be performing in this space that needed to be addressed, but created this beautiful space for our students. So thank you for your support, your presence at the grand opening. It was a wonderful thing. And thank you, as always, to Eric Zamudio for his incredible generous donation that helped make this possible.
Yep.
And would also like to invite everyone on stage, as well as everyone in the community, to come see Matilda the musical. It will be the first musical in this space, March 15th and 16th here. Over 50% sold, and we fully expect that we will sell out before opening night. You can get your tickets at showtix4u.com, and we look forward to seeing everyone there. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Melissa Carraher, and I've had the privilege of serving as the principal at Site Health for the past 6 years. I'm excited to be here tonight to highlight our school.
Can I just pause real quick? There seems to be a mic problem. Thank you. sorry. Okay. There was one of these from the back.
Oh. Is that better?
Yeah, sounds
Is that better?
I can hear.
Can you hear me now? Good? Miss Mason, or,
Yeah. Yes.
all right, I'll start again. My name is Melissa Carraher, and I have the privilege of serving as principal at Psych-Health. I've been there the past 6 years. And tonight, I am excited to have Mrs. Lauren Iger, my teacher on assignment, and Ms. Jessica Hensley, who teaches 4th grade and is also one of our building teacher leaders. When Mr. Spicer asked for our team to highlight something special about Psych-Health, it didn't take long to determine what that might be. Last spring, I had the privilege of traveling to Mayfield City Schools with colleagues from Milford to learn more about their innovative ideas related to scheduling and innovation. Part of going on the trip was being asked how I could use what I learned from my time at Mayfield to benefit the students at Psych-Health. While I was in Mayfield, I was able to see that their administration is faced with some of the same challenges that I am faced with at Psych-Health. How do I ensure our students are engaged in learning and prepared to be productive citizens, along with how do I ensure my teachers have an adequate amount of time to do what is asked of them during the school day, such as engaging students in learning and preparing them to be productive citizens? The answers to these questions is creativity and out-of-the-box thinking. Nope, still not good. Okay. How about now?
Turn that one off.
This is how you work out the kinks.
I know. I'm like, I can have a really big voice too if I need to use it. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, do you want me to start from the beginning? I don't
Oh,
mind.
no, you're good.
You're
I would
good?
just
Everybody's good? Okay, good deal. Trying to think where I was. Oh, just talking about how we had to answer those questions with some out-of-the-box creative thinking. So from that visit, it sparked an idea of something we call all school mornings. All school mornings happen at Psych-Health on the first Friday of every month. The students begin their day in their homeroom, but then they spend from 9:30 till about 12:30 with their peers doing a variety of activities, such as character building, hands-on projects, service work, and special interactive assemblies that expose students to curricular and fine art opportunities that they may not otherwise receive. These hours are staffed by our Unified Arts team, our mental health interventionists, our reset aide, as well as Mrs. Silvers, our school psychologist. The entire planning and implementation of this morning is overseen by Mrs. Iger, our teacher on assignment, and right now she's going to provide you with some of the specific examples on how these mornings have impacted our students.
Good evening. As Mrs. Carraher said, I'm Lauren Iger, and I'm the Psych-Health's teacher on assignment. Tonight, I'm thrilled to showcase our all-school morning and celebrate the success of this innovative idea. What began initially as a very big idea and undertaking has been transformed into a time of collaboration, enrichment, and engagement for our students. From the beginning stages, my role in the all-school morning has been entirely student-centered. Mrs. Carraher and I envisioned a time for students that would encompass a diverse range of activities to captivate the minds of all of our students. As we navigated through the initial planning process and logistics of the all-school morning, I began seeking community support from local businesses, applying for local grants, and working with our Psych-Health PTA to fund our all-school morning. The response from our stakeholders and the support of the idea that we received was nothing short of amazing. Throughout this school year, we have provided engaging experiences and lessons that focus on our monthly character traits, PBIS expectations, STEM and STEAM, community service projects, as well as theater and the arts. Each all-school morning has offered our students an assembly and grade-level breakout sessions, which include follow-up activities that reinforce our monthly focus. Tonight, the pictures that are presented before you showcase just a glimpse of the experiences offered during our all-school morning. To highlight just a few, in September, our all-school morning focus was on the unique talents and interests of all of our students and our staff. During this time, Mr. Alban Schneider, our mental health interventionist, showcased his unique talents at an assembly where he juggled swords while Mrs. Caraher laid on the ground beneath them, as you can see in the center picture. The students were absolutely mesmerized and left with a valuable lesson on respecting and embracing others and their differences and uniqueness. We have hosted published cartoonist Dwayne Amble, who captivated the students' attention with his illustrations and cartoons, all while telling his personal story of hard work and grit that got him to where he is today. All school mornings have created a sense of community and culture at Seippelt. Our sixth graders have been given leadership opportunities, which have helped them stand out as role models and leaders in our school community. Not only do our sixth graders participate as SOAR Academy leaders assisting with primary students during the all-school morning, but the sixth graders have actually helped plan and facilitate one of our all-school mornings that took place in January. The sixth graders created an authentic game show style assembly called Spot the Seippelt Soaring Student, where groups of students performed live skits to showcase soaring behavior at Seippelt. In addition, in February, our students learned about the power of spreading love and happiness to each other in our school and our local community. Each student had a part in a community service project where they created vases and tissue paper flowers. Then, using the vases and flowers, our entire sixth grade class set up an assembly line one morning and created floral arrangements. This week, those arrangements were delivered to Sim Villa and used as centerpieces in the dining room for Valentine's Day. In closing, I think the heart and purpose of the all-school morning can be summed up with a conversation that I actually heard between two students at our last all-school morning at the beginning of February. One second grade student asked her sixth grade buddy, "Why do we do this each month?" The sixth grade student replied, "This is just part of what we get to do at Seippelt." Thank you.
So as you learned from Mrs. Iger, the kids are quite busy during these mornings as the staff who support them in these activities. The classroom teachers, though, and our intervention specialists participate in all school mornings in a different way that our students do. Jessica Hensley, who teaches fourth grade English language arts and is also our building teacher leader, is going to explain a little bit about how the all school mornings have impacted her in her teaching.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Hensley, and as Mrs. Caraher stated, I am a fourth grade ELA teacher at Seippelt Elementary. Thank you so much for the opportunity to briefly share with you all some of the positive experiences and benefits we as a staff have seen since beginning the all-school meetings. On the screen, you can see a word cloud I created from my colleagues' input about these meetings. The big and highlighted words are the words they used most often when describing how this available time has benefited us most. These meetings have an incredible impact on both the staff and the students. As educators, when we are with our students, our number one priority is them. Our focus is on their education, connecting with them, and promoting a positive learning environment. Having the additional time from the all-school meetings allows us to do this in a more effective way. This provides an opportunity to collaborate with one another and share best teaching practices across grade levels. This extends beyond daily lessons. It allows for joint planning of events like STEAM night and literacy night without requiring additional meetings outside of our regular hours. All school morning meetings provide a platform for reviewing standards and focus areas across grade levels, ensuring there is an alignment and consistency in teaching practices. Teacher-based teams or grade level teams also benefit from these sessions, giving us a chance to examine our students' needs and areas of growth. The additional time has significantly contributed to reducing feelings of overwhelm, allowing us as educators to better manage the demands of our profession. The social aspect of these mornings should not be overlooked, as they provide an opportunity for us to have lunch with colleagues that we may not typically share the same lunchtime with. This consistent extra time for meetings and shared meals has positively impacted the morale of our entire school, fostering a sense of unity and mutual support among staff members. Overall, the implementation of the mornings has created a more collaborative, organized, and uplifting educational environment for both us and our students. We are excited to continue our all-school mornings for the remainder of this school year, and we have already started discussing ways to make these days even better for next school year. We thank you for allowing us the time tonight to highlight this new and different initiative. We hope that you can stop by SIPELT anytime the first Friday of the month to see this in action, but in the meantime, if we've generated any questions, we're happy to answer those for you tonight.
Who's coming up with the ideas for the community engagement? Are the kids throwing out ideas and being accepted, or how do you guys come up with those?
So that's a great question. Mrs. Iger has worked with the 6th grade SOAR Academy leaders, and they have done some of the idea planning. We have some ideas. We had some feedback from one of the students. They have an extra long lunch and recess, and one of the students said, I don't really like that long recess, so we're going to start in the next couple months doing an exploratory little experiment of having like some adult coloring and some more like quiet music, maybe in one of our other, like in an art room, or for some kids who don't enjoy being outside for the extra time to have something different to do.
Yeah.
So we are trying to get some feedback from the kids as well, because some of it could be a little overstimulating, and so we're trying to get some different ideas, but we're in the beginning phases. So.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, that's great. I love what you guys are doing there.
I just had a quick comment as a SIPELT parent. I think that these are great. I know that the ones that I've heard about from my son have been about the PBIS traits, and I think it's really great that you're incorporating all kinds of different outside things to come in, and it really makes those PBIS lessons stick in a way that they don't from just having like a presentation.
That's good to hear. On every Friday, we have 15 minutes with the kids all together, and we try to do our character trait introduction and lesson at that time. So 3 Fridays, they're just with us 15 minutes as a whole school. And so I think that is helping as well. Thank you.
I think this sounds awesome for the teachers and for the students. I was wondering who is running the activities when the teachers are able to collaborate and plan together?
Great question. So Lauren is kind of the one who oversees everything that's happening in the, if you've been to SIPELT, which I know you have, the academic side is the teachers, so where art, music, PE, the library, or the gym and cafeteria. It is really taken care of by our unified arts teachers, so art, music, PE, and library, and our mental health, so our reset aid and our mental health interventionist. We do have some parents that come to help as well. I think we have maybe four parents that come, and then obviously Mrs. Silvers, our school psychologist, is Lauren's second hand as well. Any other questions? Great. Thank you again for the opportunity. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm back. I would like to invite our student musicians from Milford Junior High. If you guys could please come forward here while I talk a little bit about the incredible accomplishment you all just had. So each year, the Ohio Music Educators Association, which is the professional learning organization of educators of music and the teachers of Ohio, they get together for their annual conference. It moves throughout the state. Some years it's been in Cincinnati. This year it was in Columbus. And about a year before that, they asked for, there's a submission for... Every year they ask for submissions from bands throughout the state of Ohio. The audition process involves sending in a tape or a digital recording of your band that does not have the name of the group, the director, any identifiable information on it. And that is reviewed by a panel of music educators from throughout the state, and they select groups that they would like to invite to perform at their state conference, where educators from throughout the state and speakers from throughout the country come in. This year, there were over 700 middle schools in the state of Ohio, and 2 middle schools were selected to perform. And one of them was our 8th grade band at Milford Junior High. So last week, 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, we took the entire 8th grade band up to Columbus, 68 students under the direction of Miss Jody Smith, Mr. Grayson Myers, Mr. Brandon Ditkin, and they performed their concert and several selections, including they performed an unpublished piece titled The Little Sparrow by Julie Giroux that Mrs. Smith actually connected with on Facebook and said, hey, I heard you have this new piece coming out. Could our band perform it? And Julie Giroux said yes, and they were able to perform that piece at the state conference a week and a half ago. So we wanted to recognize this is an incredible accomplishment. 2 middle schools in the state of Ohio that were vetted purely on their performance ability, not on name, not on anything like that. And these students were selected. Congratulations. Congratulations. Thanks to these students, Mrs. Smith, Mr. Myers, Mr. Ditkin, the state of music education in the District of Milford is incredibly strong. And thank you. I look forward to many years of incredible success for you all. Picture, okay? Yeah.
JD, there we go, thank you. Okay, we are now to our first public commentary for the day. Do we have some submissions? And do we have a microphone that they can use? No. Okay, I can give mine up for this session. We have 2 mics on the same channel, and we're trying to sort it out. So if you're coming up for public participation, thinks it's working. Okay. I will stand by just in case. Test, test, test. JD? Anything? Test, 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 test. We're just going to go with the lapel mic, JD.
All right, can you hear me? Is it on? Okay, all right. My name is Amanda Fox, and I have been in the community. This is my 15th year with a student in Milford. I've seen a lot of talk on social media from the community on tonight's discussion on cuts. There seems to be a lot of misinformation, so I wanted to clear some of it up if I can. The last time Milford schools had a levy on the ballot was 2013. The levy was to last 3 to 5 years, but because of the efficient spending and some TIF payouts, the district was able to make that last 10 years. In 2021, the state of Ohio legislators changed the school funding model, which left Milford at a flat rate that will not give us any increases with the current funding model. Also in 2021, we voted in 3 new board members to our board, and as someone who went to the committee meetings regularly, I can tell you that on day 1 in committee, our then treasurer, Brian Rabe, started discussing the new funding formula and the need for a levy. Fast forward to 8 months in their positions, in June or July of 2022, the board was faced with an unforeseen construction issue that required the new junior high footprint to be moved on the property so they could place the required water retention. The new location was going to have to require the Robbins building to be torn down. On August 18, 2022, the board discussed the financing of a much-needed improvements on the junior high and high school campuses. Some of these were for safety issues and because of the need of the placement of the new junior high. This is from that meeting.
Have a pot of taxpayer money called the general fund. And out of that pot of taxpayer money called the general fund, we are deciding to use some of that for capital improvement projects. The first one was the theater. So make no mistake, the theater's coming out of the general fund. Now we move over to our athletic facilities, which include concessions, restrooms, and locker rooms, replacing what's currently there. The Robbins building, which we all agreed to demolish and replace. The auditorium, and there's another piece that was on there. There's a fourth, and that is the bleachers. So all of these things, just to be clear to everyone, all of these things will be coming out of this taxpayer-funded pot of money called the general fund. And what our decision is going to be, which do we do? And how do we bridge the gap, whether it be through financing or otherwise, how do we bridge the gap to a levy that's going on a ballot in this community to add back to the general fund that we're getting ready to take away from? I wanted to.
So as you heard, there was a known levy needed back in August of 2022, and Board Member Combs explained that the coming levy would need to be enough to pay back what was being taken. According to the COF borrowing document I requested, even by financing, all right.
Good evening. My name is Erin Johnson. I've been a community member for 20 years, and I have 3 sons attending Milford, a freshman, a 7th grader, and a 4th grader. Right now, our district is struggling with a financial burden that seems to be getting heavier by the minute. One of the hardest things for any school or business to do is make budget cuts. Budget cuts in the education system don't impact just students. Budget cuts impact our students, employees, parents, and community members. We all know that the way the public education is funded in this country is like the punchline of a bad joke. It's bad. We all fully understand that funding needs to be overhauled, but we're stuck with what we have, and in the mind of some, that's a lot. In the mind of others, it's not enough. Schools are working on what voters are willing to give, and oftentimes voters don't want to give away more money than they have to. Matter of fact, if the last levy would have passed, I was personally looking at a tax hike that would have taken 3/4 of a full paycheck one time a year, meaning what I'm able to provide for my family is greatly impacted. I can't afford that. I shouldn't have to be put in that position. You can blame that on state funding or district spending. I'm sure the argument is heavy for both sides. I'm by no means saying the district does not deserve the passing of a levy. What I'm saying is, what can our district do to put as little of a burden as possible on stakeholders? Yesterday, I received an email from the district mentioning start times would be, or the talk of adjusting start times, meaning the district would save $140,000 a year. At first glance, this seems like a no-brainer, and hey, it's only 15 or 30 minutes. Wrong. One of the biggest messages pushed by our board and superintendent is that we want to impact our students as little as possible. Changing the start times, you're doing the exact opposite. This has been a hot-button topic for 5 years, maybe longer. There's countless studies that show later times are in fact better for our kids' overall health and learning. The Federal Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says lack of sleep is common among high school students and associated with the risk of being overweight, drinking, smoking, using drugs, and poor academic performance. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that high schools not start before 8:30 a.m. and says later time is better. I'm in the unique position. I have students in the district and I'm a local high school teacher. Earlier start times would overhaul the landscape of our community and not for the better. I will say up front, what I'm about to say is going to have some of you scratching your head. If I did my research right, we spent $5.3 million a year on pupil transportation between 2020 and 2023. I would like to propose cutting high school busing altogether. I know several parents would adamantly oppose this. However, the number of students actually use busing at the high school level compared to the cost of having busing is absolutely backwards. Please know this goal is not to upset anyone. You can't cut the nose to spite the face. What I'm in favor of is budget cuts. What I'm not in favor of is low-hanging fruit budget cuts. Let's slow down. Right now, we are all in freak-out mode, and we need to breathe and realize that just because it sounds like a good idea doesn't mean that it is.
Carlos Balderrama.
Howdy. I've been turning up. I have two sons that go here to Milford School. Both are special education students, Dante and Gabriel. I really like it here. I'm a Texas transplant, been here for about 5 years. I worked in Texas in the security industry for about 25 years. Most notably, I worked for Amarillo Independent School District with over 30,000 students in our student body and over 56 campuses. I don't agree with the earlier start time. And the reason I could give all sorts of reasons of budgets and things like that, but it simply has to do with Gabe wakes up at 6 a.m. to get on the bus at 7 a.m. That means he'd have to wake up at 5:30 a.m. We already have staggered bedtimes and sleep schedules and wake-up times for our sons. This just makes it farther apart. And I don't want that. And that's just really simply the only reason I don't want it. I voted for the levy increase, the increased schools. I work for a school district. I understand funding. I want to fund public schools as much as I can. I believe in the public school system. And then my next point is a non-agenda board item. And I'm going to read and just get through it. Gabe had an incident 148 days ago. I would like to express my most profound gratitude and appreciation to the dedicated staff and the entire Milford school system and community for the exceptional care and life-saving efforts they provided to my son. I cannot find the adequate words to convey my gratitude to the staff. My heartfelt thanks to both lifeguards, the teachers, the nurse, and any other staff and students that helped. They played a pivotal role. These actions reflect a high standard of care and professionalism that define Milford schools, and I am immensely grateful for their dedication and well-being of the students. Thank you.
Jennifer Zent.
My name is Jennifer Zent-Call, and my daughter is in the 10th grade at Milford High School. I am here as a follow-up to the email I sent regarding sleep-wake phase delay and the recommendations for junior high and high school start times. Just out of curiosity, I did the math, and it comes to 1 whole week. That is how much less sleep my daughter would have by the time she graduates in 2026 if you change the start time from 7:45 to 7:15. Over the course of 1 school year, 30 minutes less sleep on a daily basis comes to 84 hours and 30 minutes. Divide 84 hours by 24, and that is 3.5 days. The current 6th grade students will lose 3 weeks of sleep by the time they graduate. 3 weeks. The developing brain of a teenager needs between 8 and 10 hours of sleep every night. Currently, the bus pickup time for my neighborhood is 6:42. Realistically, a student can wake up at 6 and have 30 minutes to get ready, 10 minutes to walk to the bus stop, and 2 minutes to wait for the bus. The bus gets to school at 7:18, and they have time to eat breakfast at school before their first class. Even with the 2-hour sleep-wake phase delay, they can still sleep for the minimum amount of 8 hours if they fall asleep by 10. But if they have to get up 30 minutes earlier, they can no longer get 8 hours of sleep. 8 hours is the minimum. You've provided them with transportation, but you've taken away a biological need to sleep. The brain needs sleep to function properly. Sleep is not optional. Substance abuse, depression, and anxiety increase when students are sleep deprived. Why would you want the students to have more substance abuse, more depression, and more anxiety? Students have an increased number of sick days because they are too tired to get up to go to school. Attendance goes down and truancy goes up. When students are at school, they have difficulty paying attention in class, they have a shortened attention span, their memory is impaired, and their overall academic performance declines. I would think you would want to do everything you can to increase academic performance, not decrease academic performance. A decision to make start times earlier would not help the students, it would harm them. I appreciate you looking for ways to save money, but this is not the right solution. As I mentioned in my email, I do support eliminating high school busing if necessary and starting school at 8:30. I brought information to share with you, which you should have in front of you. Thank you.
My name is Chloe Call, and I am a 10th grade student at Milford High School. A friend of mine has compiled extensive research to support the argument to not push the school start time to 7:15. Ellen Holohan, writer of Early School Start Time Endangers Teen Drivers, spoke to several professionals about the dangers of an earlier school start time. Teens are biologically programmed to get sleepy and wake up later than adults, said Phillips, a professor with the school's Division of Pulmonary, Critical Care, and Sleep Medicine. According to this evidence, teenagers are naturally meant to go to sleep and wake up later. Instead of fighting this natural habit, we should embrace it and not make the start time even earlier than it already should be. Experts continue to describe the many benefits to later start times. After conducting a test, Professor Phillips explains, the study found that when teens increased their sleep, crash rates declined 16.5% during a period when teen crash rates throughout the state increased by 7.8%. Younger, inexperienced drivers don't fare well with additional handicaps, such as impaired alertness caused by having to get up earlier than is natural for them. As this article explains, delaying the start time of school could greatly reduce the risk of car accidents in younger drivers. This evidence is even more prudent when considering this direct quote from the CDC. Road traffic crashes are a leading cause of death in the United States for people ages 1 to 54, and they're the leading cause of non-natural death for U.S. citizens residing or traveling abroad. By changing this high school start time to 7:15, the district is not only hurting students' attendance and academic performance at school, but potentially putting people's lives in danger. On the topic of academic performance, the article titled "School Start Time" states, studies have found that approximately 60% of middle school students and more than 70% of high school students identify as sleep deprived. I can testify that this is most definitely true. Combining this with the previous knowledge that teens naturally wake up and fall asleep later than adults, it shows that delaying the start time could improve their sleep, which would allow students to focus more on academics and not have to worry about falling asleep in class. I would like to assume the people in charge of my education would want the best for my schooling and my health. If a 7:15 start time is chosen, you are saying you are fine for academic performance to plummet and the mental and physical health of Milford students to decline. On behalf of myself and my peers, I urge you to vote no on an earlier school start time for the upcoming school year. Thank you.
Michael Schaff.
Good evening.
You know my name. I'm 72 years old, or will be shortly. Never did I think I would have to deal with teenagers going to junior high, but here I am. I don't understand why, if compacting the routes makes them more efficient, that's fine. But just move everything sideways. I don't want a 12-year-old girl walking a mile in the dark every morning. I think that's asking a lot. Just slide the whole thing sideways. I have worked in Arcanum, Beaver Creek, Dayton, Centerville, Springboro school districts, and several in Indiana. Mine escapes me. And I see things like this happening over and over. And I don't understand why. I'm just a dumb air conditioning mechanic. What do I know? But I don't know why you just can't slide that schedule a little bit. Do you want your kids walking in the dark? We hear about children disappearing all the time. I just don't understand why this, unless, of course, it's a form of blackmail. You didn't pass this, so now we're going to do this so that next year you pass that. I have seen that in all these different schools. I hope that's not what I'm seeing here. So consider something else. But don't send the kids out in the dark or expect us to get up and drive them, which talk about congestion. You want that? The idea of the high schoolers, that sounds reasonable, except for the kids that don't have a car. So anyway, consider just moving the schedule sideways. Everybody starts a little later. They get out a little later. At least it's not dark. Thank you.
Thank you.
Diane Snow.
My name is Diane Snow. I am a district resident, and I'm also the mother of 2 Milford graduates and a current 7th grader. I am very concerned about the proposition of the earlier start times. I lived through 8 years of earlier start times, and it's just too early for teenagers. $140,000 seems like too small of an amount of money to save to justify the chaos it will cause. I have 2 questions. First, I do not understand how changing the start time earlier saves routes and money in the first place. Hopefully that's something that will be explained later in the meeting. And if you can move the start times earlier and save money, can you change the start times to later and save money? My other question is, what other options have you considered to save this amount of money? And why aren't those being brought to the forefront tonight? I realize that we need to cut spending until we pass the levy. I am a Milford supporter. I have always supported the schools. But there was a lot of time, effort, and research that went into making the decision to change the start times later in the first place. I don't think anyone will argue that it was a bad decision. It was a good decision. There has to be another way. I'm hoping you can look harder. For example, the number of staff that's not directly interacting with students seems to have increased significantly since my children were in school and my oldest were in school. And while I hate to see anyone lose their jobs, perhaps this is a better way to save that amount of money, because instead of affecting thousands of families, you would only be affecting a few families. I urge you not to vote to change to earlier start times. Thank you.
Thank you.
Keith Hayes.
as we've discussed, there's a huge potential savings here by taking our busing back in-house, approximately about $1.9 million a year for the first years, moving up to $2.7 million a year in consecutive years after new buses were paid off. It's about $38 million in savings over a 16-year period. At this point, I think that the board would probably be wise to table any vote tonight, just for the fact to make sure that any change to a contract with Peterman would not extend out our current contract. We're 2.5 years into a 5-year contract. If any negotiation goes on, it should be looking to maybe shave a year off of that contract so that we could implement our own busing a year earlier with less penalty in that current deal with Peterman. That's pretty much it. I'll keep it short. Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. That brings us to the treasurer's reports. Mr. Espy, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, President Chestnut, members of the board. I wanted to take you through the monthly financial report and also report on items that were deliverables that we discussed after the January special meeting. The January monthly analysis, we're 58.3% through the fiscal year, which is 7 months. All of our funds are below that percentage with the exception of the one-time funds that we've talked about for the past several months. Those include miscellaneous local grants, athletics, as well as miscellaneous federal grants, specifically tied to the safety grants. When we look at our expenditures, they're tracking $32,350 to positive variance to the forecasted amount, which is a 0.03% variance, so we're really close. Supplies and purchase services are tracking lower than projected, as they did last month as well. Revenues, we're seeing a $171,919 positive variance to the forecasted amount to a 0.02% variance, and that is tax revenue making up the majority of that. That'll continue to be trued up as we get ready for the May forecast. When we look at the operating fund interest earned for January month to date was $120,646.33 for fiscal year to date of $1.13 million and change. The bond COPS fund for January month to date was $213,404.75 for a fiscal year to date of $1.96 million and change. Financial processes that are occurring in my office in February are continued financial audit with the Auditor of State. I do believe we're kind of nearing the end of that as it's been going on for about 5 months. Beginning Medicaid cost report for fiscal year 23 has been completed, so I'll continue to work through that. Then SC View project, this is our document retention going from paper to paperless. We have sample employee files completed, workflows being built, and custom forms being created for salary notices and contracts, so we can be compliant with that with state law to get those items out to our employees. We're also working on a continued development of a 10-year capital plan with Bradley Payne Municipal Advisors to help better plan for large expenditures with capital needs over the next 10 years. We're also importing test data for financial software changes that are going to save the district at least $80,000 per year, starting implementation going live on 7/1/24. So we already have our data in that software, and we're just essentially testing it and validating that data and clearing up any errors with the imports that might occur. Some financial big wins for the district. We negotiated bank interest in interest payments in April 2023. That's projected to have a positive impact that's already forecasted of $1.2 million. So that already is in the forecast, but it's definitely a big win. We also, as I reported to you, we're looking at using virtual check cards to basically be able to get percentages back and get paid for paying our bills. We're actually expanding that now to ACH payments to get a portion of ACH payments that will be paid out. and also partnering with our bank to send checks directly from the bank, so cutting down on costs of check stock and printing costs. We also initiated, again, that virtual card process, so that's just piggybacking on what I just spoke about. Again, the financial software saving $80,000 beginning with the 24-25 school year. And then as we got into the past levy, we had eliminated $875,000 by shifting staff with resignations or retirement, and also evaluating some of our vendor contracts. I wanted to take a moment now to kind of transition into the continued expense discussion and really the reductions that are needed to go forward. First of all, the deliverables that were discussed by the board and kind of directed for myself and Mr. Spicer were an updated 5-year forecast with a $675,000 reduced, which represents a 15% budget cut on budget reduction on budgets that could be reduced. Think here, like, we're not able to reduce utility costs because they are what they are. We can try to consume utilities differently, but overall, there's not going to be a large impact on that. And so we're not able to necessarily reduce those specific budgets. Also an earned income analysis, which I'm going to go over, an earned income tax versus a property millage comparison, and then itemized reductions by FTE type if applicable. And so then as we look at additional items, the transportation study, myself and Mr. Spicer and Jeff Johnson met with Mr. Hayes in January and discussed some information that he had for us, so I have an expanded kind of information that I've compiled and looked at to bring to the board for your consideration to look at, as well as additional items that are related to expense savings that may come up in this conversation. With the new baseline of the $675,000 budget reduction that I just spoke about, this is what the 5-year forecast looks like. So you'll notice that right here in 2027, this actually is more positive than it was slated to be without that $675,000 budget cut, but still resulting in a negative cash balance of $10.7 million in year 5 of the forecast. This is really a abbreviated forecast, so you can see red is bad, and so whenever we're in red, that means our expenses are greater than our revenues, and so as these continue to be greater than revenues, it erodes the cash balance up to that $10.7 million that I had discussed. Notice that this actually has 7 years on it, though. It has 2 more years, so if you're looking at it from a 7-year forecast standpoint, we would be at near negative $50 million in fiscal year 2030. The bottom section down here represents what is our levy life indicator, meaning that when you're in the green or this white area, you're not in any kind of fiscal distress. But as soon as you go into this orange or tan area, that's caution, warning, and then emergency. So you'll see that we would basically be in warning and emergency throughout the fiscal year 26 and 27, which is the 25-26 and the 26-27 school years. This is the change that $675,000 made on the forecast. So $675,000 is a large sum of money. However, when you look at the effect on how much it pushes this curve out, it essentially buys the district about 2 to 3 months over the next several years before the district would be cash negative. It represents now a millage need of 6.58 mils. And we would, in order to get back to the 599 millage that the district had sought in November, it would be an additional $931,706 in reductions. And those are permanent reductions. So those are not reduced until maybe a levy passes, and then they could come back. That's permanent reductions, as was essentially that $675,000 from the budget. That is a permanent reduction. And the reason for, you might ask, why would we go from a 599 to what I had reported last month, which was a 7.25 prior to this $675,000 reduction? It's because the district loses an entire year of collections on property taxes. So even had we been on the ballot in March, we would have waited till the next January of 25, before collecting any property tax revenue. So it's that delay that causes that millage to spike, because now you need more to make up for having less over an additional year. So I took some time to model an earned income tax. So as I looked here with a 1.25% income tax, I was able to actually get the rates from the Department of Taxation and then go ahead and model them with analytics with the $675,000 reduction. You can see that it does get us where revenues are greater than expenses. However, they do start to trickle off right here. This is something that I discussed in the Finance Committee meeting, where I'm a believer that if the district were to choose to go to, or if the board was to choose to go towards an earned income tax and it pass, I believe that any time the expenses are above revenues, there has to be an adjustment at that point or before, and actually I would say well in advance, to avoid these kind of discussions where we're talking about large reductions and also impacting families, but impacting staff and their families as well. So in short, an earned income tax, should it be successful, I am a believer that the district would have to live within those means for the foreseeable future. When you look at the general fund revenue change with an earned income tax, I will say that it tends to take longer to phase in an earned income tax because there's more communication that has to go on with the Department of Taxation to inform employers to have to take out that and withhold that tax, because employers all over the greater Cincinnati area would have to withhold this tax even though the employees live here. And so that typically takes a lot more tracking down. So when you look at the slow phase in, that's just a projection of what the Department of Taxation was able to provide to me in terms of what they felt the phase in would look like, as well as the catch up. So if you were to look at the actual phase in percentage, in year 4 and 5, you would see actually percentage collection rates above 100% because you're making up for those lost revenues from the years before. But you can see here in the red, that is what happens to the revenue versus with no change. The gray is the revenue as it stands right now in the forecast. So what I did here is I took the U.S. Census data for the median household income. I want to say there are deductions that would likely happen from that $69,141 that I can't factor in because everyone is different in those deductions that they get. But if I purely took the median household income at 1.25, that would be $864 per year versus a 6.58 mil, and I just used that because that's where we are right now, would be $673.09 for a median household value according to Zillow. And I did check several different sites in terms of that median, and they were all within 292 to 296. So those were the values that I used just as a comparison, as the board had asked me to do in January. So getting into a little bit more about earned income tax, it includes only the following items to the extent that they are part of the modified adjusted gross income. So you have employee compensation such as wages, salaries, and tips, and self-employment income from sole proprietorships and partnerships. So earned income tax does not include retirement income, interest, dividends, capital gains, and unemployment benefits. The retirement income is essentially the Social Security. So that's important to know. These are also the credits that come out to get to the modified adjusted gross income. So married filing jointly would have a credit. There's also child care and dependent care credits, retirement income credit, and then senior citizen credits that are taken in. And this came from the Department of Taxation website. There's a lot of really good information. I could have put a lot here and had several slides. So I would definitely suggest to our community members and the board and administration to go out and actually check out the Department of Taxation as it applies to earned income taxes. There's a really good amount of information out there. So these items are deductible on the Ohio Schedule of Adjustments, Social Security and Tier 1 Railroad retirement benefits. I don't really know how that got in there, but that just seems to be one of the things that has stayed for several years that I was reading up on. And then additional benefits, as well as retired personnel pay for retired military service members. So that's important to note as well. So, as I had said before, now transitioning into transportation, I guess this might be a good spot to stop and see if there are any questions from the board. Okay, so before we go into transportation, I do want to address, I know people have passionately spoke tonight about $140,000 in savings. I want to thank the Peterman that we have, I would say, put a large number of requests on in the last 2 to 3 months of gathering data, and they've been wonderful to provide data to us in terms of changing routes and what if this, what if that. And so they've done a lot to help us out. And so part of that $140,000 would be the elimination of 2 routes. We're essentially looking at $70,000 per route. But what we have learned as well is that due to the timing and the reconfiguration of where the buses will sit during the 25-26 school year, we would have an additional cost without the savings of the 140. So let's say that no start times change. We would have that $140,000 that we essentially don't capture in savings, but we would have an additional $560,000 because we'd have to add 8 routes due to the timing change to avoid some of our elementary students getting to their schools on time, seeing as much as 20 to 30-minute delays if we were to not add those 8 routes. So it's not so much just about the $140,000, it's also about avoiding the $560,000. So I just want to keep that in mind. I know that's not information that anyone in this room, probably besides Mr. Spicer and myself, have had up until tonight, because this is information that we gathered just recently from Peterman and all the requests that we've given to them. So as we get into transportation study, Mr. Hayes provided a good bit of information, and during the meeting that we had in January, I really kind of started to peel the onion back and try to figure out how the numbers were impacted. So this was the initial number for salaries that we had, and benefits were not factored in at the time. And I'm happy to provide this to anyone, so it'll be up on the Treasurer website. So feel free, this will get pushed out. But $2.5 million, looking at $22 an hour, and I basically backed those numbers out, and I looked at it in 8-hour shifts, and it came to a number of employees of 73.85. I factored in about 195 days with all of the different, the kids don't go to school 195 days. However, there are other trips that occur outside of the regular school year that need to be factored in. So when we look at a full-time equivalent, and that's just the number of staff we have, and you multiply by that salary per employee, Medicare is 1.45%, retirement is 14%, and then what I did here with this $15,422.88 is I averaged the family and single in terms of the cost to the district. I averaged those. I believe that's a low cost because I believe that's too low. It's going to be trend more towards the family side. But when you put this together, salaries and benefits are at $4.1 million. There are also additional positions needed beyond drivers, one of which is a director of transportation. We would need a router, at least 1 router, an admin assistant, or 2 admin assistants, and I put 2.83 mechanics. And you might ask, how could you have 0.83? And I'm going to come up with that number, and I'm going to show you how I benchmarked that number. But the bottom section is showing the family and single coverage and that average and how we came to that number. So we like to benchmark people. So I've got Forest Hills in here, which they were part of the Channel 9, Channel 19 did had an article out a couple months ago. They were part of that. And if you look just in mechanics, I used the average salary of $66,456 over here. This is the average number of students served by FTEs, and this is the average number of mechanics in this group. This is the same local group that I benchmark a lot of our data against. This is Oak Hills, Mason, Sycamore, Loveland, Indian Hill, Forest Hills. That's how I came up with 2.83. It could go to 2, it could go to 3. You could clearly see some districts have a wide variety. That's how I came up with that number. And then the benefits that are associated. So this was all factored in at $22 per hour. And so in this case, you have $5.6 million in total costs, and the Peterman contract is about $6.1 million, so you would see a variance of $482,000 per year. The issue is that you're not going to get all drivers at $22 an hour. So I used Forest Hill's salary schedule here. This is 15 steps if you count step 0. And what I did is I did a random percentage to randomly distribute all of the full-time equivalents over that 0 to 14. So when you randomly distribute using the Forest Hills numbers, you come to $4.592 million in salaries and benefits for those drivers. In this case, when you add those numbers together with those additional router, director of transportation, the benefits, and everything else that are tied into that with insurance, you're coming to a negative variance per year of $83,564. If you look over 16 years, it's negative $1.3 million. If the district were to implement this and there were no issues, like everything went great, this is the impact on the forecast. Now granted, it wouldn't go into effect. I modeled it going into effect next year, but we're under contract. But I just did that just so we could see the impact. You can see that there's a little bit of separation here between the red and the gray, but you basically end up in the same spot. When we go forward, this is a base forecast with taking all of the salaries and benefits in and reducing the purchase service contract right now with Peterman. There was also some discussion that we had about using different routing software. So the routing software that we did, Jeff Johnson was able to put this together to find out what other districts are using. Several districts are using VersaTrans, which is what we use, and there's also TransFinder, which is a competitor, with one district using Edulog. There are some additional considerations here that this doesn't really take into account because it's very hard to be able to project something like this. This assumes no supply chain issues with procuring buses. It also does not consider the devices like cameras and other routing that are bus specific, as well as the maintenance of equipment in buses, other than the mechanic, the in-house mechanic. It also does not consider the cost of substitute drivers. When I looked at this number, it's anywhere between 10 and 15% is what I was hearing from other transportation directors per day of substitutes. So that would need to be added in as well. The benefit costs, the staffing shortages, there are definitely staffing shortages with busing, filling bus driver positions that have been felt throughout the area, really since the COVID pandemic. And then benefit costs can and have been volatile. So, we look anywhere between 5.5 to 8.5% in cost of benefits per year. And so when we look at those numbers, it definitely adds to that benefit total that would continue to rise. There's also the administration and onboarding of an additional 80, give or take, employees in tracking evaluations. The laddering of lease/purchase agreements on the buses over time. So you'd have to bring in, a number of buses and then continue to replace them with those leases likely crossing one another or laddering. And then it doesn't take into account the cost that many districts now pay for licensure, physicals, and other hiring incentives to hire bus drivers that would have to be factored in. And probably the most concerning to me is the severance payouts required by Ohio Revised Code. So sick leave days that accrue and could potentially have to be paid out if they're still on the books when that person retires. And so that is at least 0.25 of their daily rate times the days that they have in severance. I think that a lot of information that Mr. Hayes brought us is great. I'm sure you're going to have some information to send back to us, and we'll compare notes and do all that stuff. But I appreciate the information that you brought us. I think given what I have right now, I would not feel comfortable advising the board to go this way, but with more information, and I think it's something we should continue to look at. I mean, I think we have to look at a lot of things when we are where we are financially. So I appreciate your energy that you've put into this, and like I said, I'm sure we'll continue to get more inputs with this. Any questions on that?
I think something that.
Let's go ahead.
Sorry, no, you go first.
The numbers that you modeled did not include these additional considerations, or they did?
They don't. These
Okay.
are additional considerations that it's really hard to know until you actually hire a group. And I actually did this randomization where I could continue to update the numbers with different models of how they were distributed over step 0 to step 14. And also, I randomly modeled how we would potentially purchase buses, because you don't want to purchase all brand new buses, because then they're all going to need to be replaced at the same time. You'd have to find buses that are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old and create a rotation, which I think will be a challenge in and of itself. Not to say that it can't be done. I think it will be a challenge. And then you also have to make sure you have loaner buses. So typically what you do is you start phasing out buses towards their end of life. They stay, and you use them as I don't want to say loaner bus, but it's a backup bus in case something goes down. But it's a fine line of, there are actually models that are done, modeling trends that I was a part of in a previous district, where they will tell you don't have a bus in life for more than 6 years. And the longer that you stretch it out, it has a larger cost on the maintenance side. So there's a lot of factors there, a lot more inputs that we could probably look at. And like I said, the severance payouts, I think, are really the sticking point for me.
I think also just having a partner like Peterman when things change, like state laws around tracking the buses, cameras, things like that. I know when I talk to you about it, they typically share a lot of that expense for us, right? So if it's not something that's a great expense, but they need to change or add to the buses to adhere to state law, that's something that they do that's not currently on your list here either.
Yeah, and I think, Mr. Johnson would probably be better to speak to that if there are any specifics, but, I know that they're a great partner for the district.
Yeah.
I also wanted to talk about inside millage. I'd kind of seen some things in the community and questions about inside millage, and talks about a windfall that the district is getting. The district, because we're on fiscal years, so we're 7/1 to 6/30, and then you've got the tax year, which is 1/1 to 12/31. So with this property value increase, the inside millage, which is 11% of our total millage, it increased. So this fiscal year, we're feeling about $750,000 increase. Once we get into a whole cycle of having a fiscal year with that entire increase, it is about $1.5 million. But a windfall is unexpected, and I want to be very clear that inside millage is in the forecast. It is always modeled in the forecast. And the way that it works is we're looking at what we expect to have from a property valuation increase. So when you looked at the May forecast, I had 42%. It came back down to where it actually fell in November, and then that model is very, very close. Very, very close. And it's going to get even closer as we file the May forecast this year. I hope that you've seen that the variances that we do see every month when I talk about expenses and revenues, they're very close. 0.03, 0.02% variances. So when we look at that, there's no way that I could be that close if we weren't factoring in inside millage. As a quick reminder about what inside millage is, it's basically, it doesn't have a reduction factor on it. So it's 10 mills that are inside the Ohio State Constitution. So they're unvoted mills because we essentially just get them. However, we get a portion of them in a political subdivision. So we have 3.8 mills. 3.3 come into the general fund, 0.5 goes into the building fund. So 11% of that is that inside millage. When you look at this, and I did this back, I believe, in May, if we had a $100,000 home that appreciated to $139,000 in terms of appraised value, you would be looking at $51.87 annual change, or $4.32 per month on the inside millage that comes to the school district. So again, I just want to make the point that this is all in the forecast. It isn't unexpected. It's very much expected, and I model it, and I continue to model it in the forecasts. You can also see it when you look at the actual versus the forecasted. You can see that there is an increase here, and that increase is on that 11% of inside millage. If we were to break down 1.5 million by the expected revenues in fiscal year 25, we're talking about 1.8% growth, which is below the CPI and inflation percentage rates in January of 2024. Just to put it into context. This is the difference of revenue with and without inside millage. You can see that there's a slight uptick in the gray here. Again, but it was modeled. This is the difference of that inside millage over time. It's actually slightly greater because 1.5 million is greater than 675,000 that we did in reduction. So that widens right there, but still a very similar effect.
Quick question on millage. The only way we could get more inside millage would be if another government entity said, sure, you can have our inside millage, you can have a percentage of our inside millage, right? There's really no way we can.
Yeah, you would have to move it, and yeah. It's very difficult.
Not likely.
Very difficult, very unlikely. And that's really, in terms of the deliverables for you, what I was able to bring back.
How does fair school funding work into that?
So fair school funding, if you really look at the district, I mean, there's a biennium budget. So every 2 years, the governor approves a budget that goes through the state legislature. And so we are in year one of a biennium budget. The last biennium budget was the first biennium budget that the fair school funding plan took effect. So the 21-22 and the 22-23 school years were the first biennium budget that we were affected, and all the other districts were affected in the state by the fair school funding plan. For us, what happened is our numbers were below, our numbers on the new formula were below what we had been getting in the 2020-2021 school year. So we're a guarantee district. So I know that several of you had reached out today because you got, I think, a message from a community member that provided the SFPR. That report we get twice a month, and that, or a version of that, and that's how we get our income from the state. We do get income from the state. The issue that we're having is that income has not adjusted really since 2017-18 numbers. So prior to that, there was a talk about TIF income. That has helped. The other thing that has helped is all the biennium budgets leading up to the fair school funding had really helped the district. That's how we were able to go from a promised 4-year levy in 2013 to 10.5 years before going back to the ballot. The fair school funding plan has not been helpful, and we're on a guarantee, so we're basically capped. So more kids come in, we're capped. We do get some funding that's based on economic disadvantage and success and wellness that would slightly creep up, but it's a small portion of what we're doing. And both of those economic disadvantaged and success and wellness are restricted funds that have to be utilized for that. So we have success and wellness funds we use for our mental health interventionists, and we use all of that plus about $30,000 for those. And then we also utilize the economic disadvantaged funds throughout the district for the students that fall into that category. So it's not a help to the district. We do get funds. I want to be very clear. We do get funds. They just have not been adjusted over time. I would love, even if it was a 1.8% change, like we're getting an inside millage, we're not getting that when it comes to the Fair School Funding Plan.
Good.
So I think now we would like some input on maybe our next steps.
Next steps around what you want us to bring to, what other information we need in order to make a decision on what a potential
Yes.
levy would look like.
Yes.
I think it would be helpful, are people okay if I start? It'd be helpful to see what some of those options are, because I think we're going to start needing to get down to some dollar amounts and make some choices. So, you know, we heard about transportation this evening. We've also heard that there's some options for staffing reductions. So I think it would be helpful for us, for me as a board, to see almost an a la carte alongside what a millage, and I would like to see an income tax would look like. So if our options for funding are generally
Right.
property tax or an income tax.
Yeah, so I mean, what I can do is, I mean, we can obviously prepare some recommendations, and I can model and have the resolutions ready for an earned income tax or a traditional levy or whatever kind of levy. So, I mean, I'm happy to put that together, and we can bring that back for March. That would still be on the timeline that we've kind of asked you to make a decision on, but I think March would be where the decision has to be made. It would give us a chance to also take some more input from any other items.
Yep.
I think that sounds good. I definitely think looking into both the earned income tax and the regular levy are definitely something that we should look into. Just hearing from the community and hearing from the discussions that we've had and seeing what you've brought to us, I think I'd definitely like to see both. So just echoing what you said there.
I agree. I would like to definitely like to see that information.
Same.
I think timing-wise, I mean, there's going to be an impact on staffing. I mean, we're going to have to do that, and so I think it's only fair to anybody in our district who would be affected that we give them notice that's along the school timing, so that they don't lose opportunities if their position is eliminated here to be hired in another district on regular timing.
I think we can do that.
So that will be for next meeting. So Mr. Espy, if we get those and you have some options for us, at the next meeting we could potentially decide what would go on a November ballot and what the impacts would be across the district.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I think something else that we have to be mindful of is we have to look additionally at what do we do if, regardless of whatever goes on the ballot or doesn't go on the ballot, of what the next steps are if that's not a successful
Plan B
ballot attempt. So what kind of adjustments will the district have to make should that, because I think it's very important. I don't think we quite got there in November, like what, you know, that these items might be on the table.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's important that everyone knows what is on the table if this is not successful.
I think that's really critically important.
I think it's critical.
And it also means, sorry, Mr. Spicer, we lose an entire year, because if we don't pass in November, we can go in May, but even if we pass in May, collections don't begin,
Right.
we still have that delay in collection time.
Exactly.
Yes. Sorry, Mr. Spicer. Well, you got a dead mic.
That's good because your mic doesn't work.
I will say that was a really long board report. Yes.
I was gonna say, we're gonna have to budget for a new subwoofer.
Okay.
So
Little
a motion
really.
and a second to accept the board report, because it
Yes,
was a really
I-
long one.
A motion and a second to accept the board report.
So moved.
Second.
Any more discussion, folks? Okay, please call the roll.
Ms. Will?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes. Thank you.
I won't be offended if you accidentally call me Mrs. Wilson.
I almost did. I caught myself. Going on into number 2, contracts for approval. We have 2 contracts to bring before the board this evening. A CCP agreement with Sinclair, which is no cost to the district. That just allows that partnership for the 24-25 school year. And then a student that would be placed at Ohio Valley Voices for the remainder of the 23-24 school year at the listed amount. And we're bringing those to you. You might notice, like, why would we be bringing you the Ohio Valley Voices for less than the $25,000 threshold? It's because the total spend for Ohio Valley Voices is now above $25,000.
It bumps Ohio Valley Voices.
It does.
Above the threshold. Okay. Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the 2 contracts as listed?
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions, discussion? Please
No.
call the roll.
Ms. Will?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes, thank you.
As promised, a couple meetings ago, I'm bringing the 2024 acceptance of rates from Claremont County. This is the rates that our, millage would be collected at. This is just a formality with the Claremont County auditor.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the acceptance rates as presented? Sorry, there's a lot of approvals and accepts in there.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Please call the roll.
Ms. Will?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Item 4 is donations. Just want to thank these individuals for donations to Mulberry students enrolled in the free and reduced lunch program, as well as 4 25 milliliter flasks for the junior high donated by Philip Gettinger.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the 2 donations?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Ms. Will?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Item 5 is disposal or auction of the following items. These items will either be disposed of or auctioned off if they have any value left. This just allows us to get it off of our asset tag and inventory so it can be marked as disposed of.
Can I have a motion to approve the disposal or auction of the items listed below?
So moved. Second.
Any questions or comments? Please call the roll.
Ms. Will?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Spicer.
Thank you, President Chestnut, members of the board. This evening, we do have a middle school update. Mr. Johnson. to the podium, and we'll have him discuss some of our wonderful pictures. And I do believe we have a movie as well.
Sorry about our technical difficulties. We're still learning our new space. So got a few pictures and updates. This is a picture of the field house. In between the two buildings there will be the main entrance into the stadium when everything's complete. Concession stand and public restrooms in the building to your left. Locker rooms, the large portion of the building are the 3 basketball courts, and then you kind of can't see it. It's behind that where our wrestling area is. So things are progressing. Most of the brick is done at this point in time. The building is dried in, short of windows and doors. But you go to the next one. Most of what's going on inside the field house currently is continuing to rough in plumbing as well as installing interior masonry walls. So here's an overhead shot of our whole site, looking from east to west. Obviously in the distance is our academic wing, where you see most of the progress. They're working from west to east. The middle section there is cafeteria as well as some classrooms, the main entrance. And then the last section is our athletic area. Off to the right or the north of that is our auxiliary gym and locker rooms. Off to the left is the main gym. These were taken about 2 weeks ago, maybe. That the main gym has since been poured this week. This is looking to the north, give you a little bit of a view from left to right. Again, our academic wing. We installed, the masonry is complete to the first floor. Structural steel was installed this week, and the hollow core flooring that will create the second floor will begin to be installed on Monday. Here you can see that main gym area. That is 100% vapor barrier because of the wood floor that will go underneath that. This was taken probably a week and a half ago. They put the wire mesh down, and then, like I said, it was poured, I believe, on Tuesday of this week. Here you can see the structural steel that I mentioned being installed in the academic wing. So on top of those horizontal beams and the masonry will be that hollow core flooring, and then the steel continues to go up. It's not the best representation, but when you're on site and you look at that tall beam in the middle and realize that that's how tall the building's going to be or close to it, gives you a little bit of a kind of a perspective on the building we're really going to get. And this is a drone video of the whole site. And again, this was taken about 2.5 weeks ago. It's sped up a little bit. Cars don't typically drive that fast through campus. That laydown area at the bottom right there will be our parking lot. Starting Monday for about between 2 and 3 weeks, there will be a lot of activity. There's a pretty large crane supposed to come in tomorrow, and we will have approximately 15 truckloads of hollow core flooring coming in every day on site. So there'll be a lot of in and out, a lot of deliveries that'll occur, and it's one of those times in the project that you're going to see a huge amount of change in a short period of time. But I can also promise you're going to see smaller amounts of progress in a long period of time eventually. So, especially once the building gets dried in, the drone video doesn't look as cool because it doesn't change because everything's inside. But it is neat to see the changes that's coming. We're still continuing in a little bit further in the meeting. We're looking for approval for an easement and our line extension agreement with Duke. We do have a bit of a delay with our transformer that will affect the field house, but we're continuing to work with Duke to try to accelerate the delay, if you will. But things continue to go well.
Could we throw that video back up and go about halfway in? I want to capture the water detention area.
Okay.
And how important that is and how it shifted the move from west to east to then. And
back it up, Steve, because it's below the screen. Keep coming. There you go. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, kind of from where the light pole is, it's kind of hard to see. I don't know if, John, you can point it out or you want me to come get it. That area, and it continues to go all the way down that way. That is stormwater detention that is required by Claremont County. We're obviously adding a lot of non-pervious surface instead of grass and dirt that water seeps through. We're putting in asphalt and concrete and roofing and everything else. That water all sheets, it doesn't sheet into it. Some of it does, but most of it's actually through storm piping. All that rainwater goes into that basin that is there. And then there's a smaller pipe that leaves that basin so that we slowly release that water and we don't flood out our neighbors. Having to put that in ended up pushing that whole middle school to the east. It would have been touchy as to whether or not we would have not had to tear down the Robbins building and the locker rooms and everything, but certainly putting that in, those buildings are underneath where our current athletic area is in the middle school.
Yeah, right.
Those old buildings.
This is where the old Robbins building is. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's it for the middle school. Could you give us a quick update on the sinkhole?
Yeah, so what was it, about 2 o'clock this afternoon?
2 o'clock this afternoon.
I got a phone call. I called John. It appeared that our sinkhole was reappearing.
Oh, dear.
Obviously, a little bit of panic went through. It's in the exact same location. There's a depression in the ground of about 1.5 feet. We did put some safety fencing around it, but we did walk the pipe. We walked all the way through it. It's intact. Everything's good. We talked to the contractor. They're coming out tomorrow. His immediate response to me after sending a picture was, it's just settling. I still have some questions for him, but again, the pipe itself is intact. Everything's good. We're 99% sure it's just a matter of kind of touching up that area from settling over time, but obviously we're going to follow up with them tomorrow and kind of double, triple check that that's the case. So if you see that fencing out there, don't panic.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I mean, let's talk a little bit about school start times. I think it's really important to, one, recognize the work and effort that went into making the initial change to 7:45. And the original recommendation was 8:30. I would certainly be an advocate for an 8:30 start time or even 9 o'clock, which I think would be ideal with the research. So it's really important for us to just recognize, and anyone that's watching or those that are here, those that spoke this evening, we hear you, we understand school start times and what it means for our kids. This is a discussion tonight about school start times and the potential savings of $140,000 by moving the start times back 2 routes. But the other piece is finding out that going into the 25-26 school year, there would be a need for additional routes. Could you push the afternoon routes back further? Potentially. But you're also then talking about your 9, 10, 9, 15 schools getting out, not starting till 9:30. So there's the other half, if you will, for us to worry about. So again, just a discussion for the board, and it could be nothing at this point. We can move on. So it's really just an opportunity for you to hear what Mr. Espy presented this evening about transportation costs, and ultimately, I think what is important is what I heard these board members say is that you wanted to preserve busing. And so what I also heard this evening from the community that's here tonight is to cut high school busing and keep the start times, or potentially move the start times later. So that's something to consider as well.
I had a couple follow-up questions on that. When we learned about those new bus routes and that it's going to cost potentially $560,000 to add those 8 routes, are we talking about a $700,000 change there, because we're talking about the $560,000 plus the $140,000 if we would not change the start times?
Yes.
Okay. And then I just had a couple of questions based on the feedback we've been getting from the community, both tonight and then in emails. What would happen to those extra routes if we did cut high school busing? Do we know that yet, or is that something we would need to look into?
I mean, I think we would still need to have a discussion with Peterman and routing about that. If we were to cut high school, if we would still need to add those additional 8 routes and what that would look like.
And then I heard from someone today through email, I think she emailed all of the board members, asking if we would be able to like flip-flop the elementary and the junior high and high school busing. And I'm wondering how that works, because I know that we have some challenges with the elementary schools being further out. So is that even an option?
We asked Peterman yesterday to look into that potential swap. So we asked them to look at what it would look like for high school, junior high to start around 9 o'clock and then move the elementaries back. So they're working on that scenario for us as well. And then there was also an ask from staff members at the 9 o'clock elementary buildings if they could become an 825 building and just flip the 825 to 9s as well. So there's also that caveat that we had asked them to look in for us as well.
And then just finally, we had heard from, I believe, Mr. Schaft, who said, why can't we just shift the whole thing sideways? I'm assuming that's because some of our schools are already getting at like 4 o'clock. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the other issue, is that you have potentially elementary students leaving at 4:15 or 4:30. And I think that's sort of the issue. And I will anecdotally tell you that we have trouble getting building subs for our 9 o'clock schools. Not so much the 825s, but it's the 9 o'clock schools. We have more of an issue trying to get building subs in those elementaries, because they are there till at least 4 o'clock and later. So.
And I know for the teachers in the late buildings, they hate the late times just on a personal level. They can't make doctor appointments for their kids and, different things like that. So I think it's something to consider also.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, we would go to a 2-tier busing system. We would drop all of our elementaries to roughly the same time, and then we could then move our junior high and high school kids up to 8:30-ish, let's say. But it's the cost. I mean, there's the cost of doing that business that we just can't afford. And I think that's why the decision was made to move from 7:15 to 7:45. It was a compromise. And then that's where we are.
Sort of related to what Mr. Schaft mentioned, not shifting a full 30 minutes, but would Could we split the difference? I mean, that still affects the late schools, but if it's 15, that's 15 minutes of sleep potentially, and maybe not as significant of an impact. In theory, the whole...
We can look at that.
The whole busing could
Yep.
How much are buses affected by our times affected by schools we are required to bus to? So
parochials, et cetera?
Yeah. Or do
Jeff?
parochials just fit in where they fit in?
As well as how would it impact the Oaks?
Yep.
You'll have to forgive me, I don't remember the exact rules, but we have to get them to their school within a certain amount of time of when their school starts and pick them up when they leave. There is a window that we have. I want to say it's 30 minutes, but I'm not 100% sure of that, so please don't quote me on it. But we can't dictate what their school start times are. So we have to work with them, but we do have a little bit of a window. And we combine parochial routes, we have gathering routes, we'll pick them up, bring them to a location. We try to get as efficient as we can with what we do with the private schools.
And I taught in the 80s at the junior high, and it was very early. We started our classes at 7:10 a.m.
Yep.
Mary Ann was the attendance secretary. But, and it was difficult for me as a mom with little kids. But I remember being told at the time that that was due to the earlier times were also due to the afternoon sports for the junior high and high school kids and kids who want to work. So is that still the case, or?
I mean, I think it could affect work. We can certainly work around the athletics and extracurricular activities. It just pushes them out later in the evening, is what it does. I would also say that at that time, you probably didn't have as many fields with lights, et cetera, in the fall.
True.
You didn't have that, so maybe, so that changes that. As you know, our turf fields are lit. We rent them out, and those lights are on, and way into the evening.
So you will keep us updated with further information you hear from
Yes.
Peterman as they do that?
Yes, we will update you with more, gather more input from our community, and go from there.
And to reiterate what Mr. Estrie said, a big thank you to Peterman, who's been working through this, because it's not push a button. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and we're asking for a lot, and we appreciate that.
That's correct.
I sympathize with the parents who've written us and spoke tonight. I mean, I know I lived through it as a parent, and my children are doing it with their children. It is very difficult and a big concern, but we're also facing very difficult and concerning cuts. So it's just hard.
Yeah, I'd just say thanks for, writing into us, right? I was saying earlier in our meeting, it's keep them coming. If you got ideas, I think that the questions here and even the questions that are at the podium, hopefully they got some answers, or there's some research that's going to happen for each one of them. And yeah, just keep sending us emails, and let's see how we can answer those questions.
I think lastly, on just not so much on school start times, but if we are to change a couple routes, et cetera, cut them, it doesn't change our contract with Peterman. It doesn't extend it 5 more years, et cetera. So when we're to dispel that rumor, that does not change our contract. Correct? Okay, very good. All right. Then I'll move on to item 3, approval of the 2024-25 Ohio High School Athletic Association resolution to continue membership, asking for your approval.
I need a motion to approve the Ohio High School Athletic Association as required by their constitution to annually adopt a resolution authorizing school membership.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments?
Nope.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Will?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes. Next, we are moving to human resource business. I request approval for consent items F1 through 4. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Any questions, comments, discussion? Please call the roll.
Ms. Will?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes. Next up, we have curriculum and instruction. First item for curriculum pay. I need a motion to approve curriculum pay as listed.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Short list this month. Please call the roll.
Ms. Will?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes. Next up, we have a motion to approve the kindergarten tuition for the 24-25 school year to be $3,600 per student. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, can you tell us a little bit about what this change is?
Yeah.
So what we did is we looked at the current costs of what we're paying in terms of staffing, and we needed to make an adjustment. Those numbers had remained very stagnant in terms of the tuition rate, so now we're kind of right-sizing that and getting closer to our expenses.
And is it, how does it compare to other, our local districts, our favorite group that we compare to?
I believe Paul Daniels had done some benchmarking on that. Sorry to make you walk all the way up to the front.
And grab a mic on your way.
In the
Thank
great,
you.
aren't we?
That big of a change?
Promise I don't have any metal in my mouth. Up here maybe. So when we met, we were looking at benchmarking across other districts. The $3,600 puts us in line with most districts that are public. If you are parochial or private, we are still relatively in line with almost half of what their costs are versus being a parishioner or a non-parishioner. And as John mentioned, we were trying to preserve all-day kindergarten. It is what we believe is fundamentally best for kids internally. There is time for academics, there is time for purposeful play, there is time for also art, music, and PE. So this puts us closer to being revenue neutral or not having debt. And we are probably in the middle of the pack or aligned with most public schools. And if people really want to dig into that, the prices that we listed are on the agenda for the C&I committee on our website.
And just to clarify for the public, this is for all-day kindergarten
It is all day.
because there's still no cost for half-day.
Right. John can explain more, but we receive funding for half the day. That's all the state gives us. And so we, in order to provide the other half a day, have to be tuition-based.
It really comes down to going back to the guarantee. So if we weren't on the guarantee and we were getting additional funds for every student, it would still be at the percentage that we get, which is like 34%. So we would be getting 34 cents on the dollar for each kindergarten student we were educating. But because we're on the guarantee, we don't get really any additional funding if that program gets larger for the district.
Don't you love it?
So there's EMIS coding that goes into coding the student that's paying tuition So we still get the half FTE flat funding through the Fair School Funding Plan, and then the idea is this tuition makes up the other half.
Any other questions, comments? Please call the roll.
Ms. Will?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes. Summer school rates. I need a motion to approve summer school rates for financial literacy and physical education as listed.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Please call the roll.
Ms. Will?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes, thank you. Now on to business operations. I need a motion to approve an easement to cover the facilities that will be installed on the property located at 5735 Wolf Pen Pleasant Hill Road and the line extension agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Questions, comments? Everyone here? No? All part of the middle school process.
Yes.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Will?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes, thank you. I need a motion to approve contract to award the Pattison and Mulberry bathroom additions.
So moved.
Second.
Questions, comments?
This is to add bathrooms because we are adding preschools to the Pattison and Mulberry schools, correct?
That is correct.
So when the middle school opens, the
Yes.
current site of preschool will be closed and they'll be dispersed. So not adding, I just want to make sure.
Right.
Just the bathrooms.
Just, yes, adding bathrooms. Rules are different for small people. The littlest eagles need more bathroom breaks. Okay, can I get a roll call?
Ms. Will?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes, thank you. We are now to our some of our final items. Do we have any additional public participation?
I do not.
Okay. Discussion. Board members, who has anything to add to discussions we've had tonight? Comments? Anything?
No.
Yes, Mrs. Will. Ms. Will.
It's not to add to the discussion that we've had this evening, but I just wanted to comment on a couple of things. Number one, for those of you in the audience who were unable to be here when they had the ribbon cutting ceremony for this wonderful theater, I just want to once again thank Eric Zamudio, who is a Milford alumni who donated, I believe, $1 million.
$100,000.
$100,000, okay. And to Josh Kaufman, who Eric said, without him, this would not have happened. So I'd like to thank both of them. Secondly, I attended the Miami Township trustee meeting on Monday and received a very warm welcome from all of the people there. And the one thing that stood out is they are going to be presenting a 5-year plan for the parks in the community, which I think everyone here would be interested in. So that's forthcoming. And the other thing is that there was a young lady who was there. She's a member of the 8th grade Honor Society. And I know I'm going to butcher her first name. I apologize ahead of time. Betsy Mathis. Anyway, she was coming to earn time toward her requirement for public service for the Honor Society. So she came with her dad, and I thought that was really cool. So that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you for sharing. Along similar lines of other boards we interact with, as Great Oaks liaison, I wanted to remind everybody that Wednesday, March 13th at 4:30, Live Oaks is going to have a ribbon cutting. I think we all, as board members, got direct invitations, and the public are definitely welcome. There's been a lot of work going on over, and we're lucky to have Live Oaks so close and such a great resource for our students, and really for all the students in the area, but it's especially close to us, which makes us lucky. And then I wanted to just reiterate with the board that we have been talking about the need for a levy. This was talked about in 2019. We all knew that this was coming, and wherever community or other members stand on the board, I appreciate when it remains respectful, and you will see the 5 board members here having conversations and respecting opinions and questions. Nobody is going to be happy with what we come up with. That's collaboration. We all give, we all take a little bit. But we are here because we support the schools and we believe in Milford. And yes, the funding is broken at the state level, but that's not something we can fix right now. We can keep trying, we can keep advocating, but in the meantime, we have a responsibility as a board to make the funding work, to bring options that make sense, to carefully consider when we have additions and when we have things that we need to cut. So I appreciate the thoughtful questions that I've heard from the board and the administrative in just the past couple months, specifically as we really dig into this. Is that it? We have 2 upcoming meetings. Our next 2 board meetings, we have a board retreat this Saturday at noon, February 17th. It'll be back over at the board office from 12 to 4. We have our next regular board meeting Thursday, March 21st, 6 o'clock at the board office, 1099 State Route 131, Milford, Ohio 145150. That's it. Can I have a motion for adjournment? Oh, I did not offer Mr. Spicer.
I was just going to reiterate that Saturday's board retreat is an opportunity for board members to come together and it's being facilitated by someone outside the district. It's team building, et cetera. No action will happen there.
Yes, sorry.
Sounds like some trust falls.
Maybe.
No. Great. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Will?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.